Right now, somewhere between Windsor and the U.S. border, investigators are still accounting for what they pulled out of a cross-border network that had been quietly running for 18 months. Nearly 1.7 tons of cocaine, methamphetamine, and opium. $139 million estimated street value, and two suspects still outstanding as of this morning. I'm Boag Chongsnovez, and what you need to understand before we get into any of this is that the word bust gets thrown around so fast it stops meaning anything. So tonight, we slow it down. What was actually behind that door? How the backdoor logistics held together for so long, and whether Project Bay closed the network or just trimmed a branch. Now, let's open the door all the way, because what Project Bay actually left on the evidence table is the kind of physical inventory that tells you exactly what tier of operation you're dealing with. Investigators confirmed 973 kilograms of suspected cocaine and 660 kilograms of suspected methamphetamine, plus opium, all moving, according to police, hidden inside legitimate commercial truck shipments across the Windsor U.S. border corridor. On top of the narcotics, they pulled 17 firearms, including what CBC is reporting as a large anti-tank rifle, cash, jewelry, and electronic devices. And before anyone calls this a clean sweep, remember, 21 people charged across 102 offenses is a serious charge sheet. But two suspects are still outstanding. Now we shift geography. And I want you to sit with this for a second because it is genuinely significant. Just 2 days ago, Liberian Joint Security Forces raided a warehouse in Duazon, about 20 kilometers east of Monrovia. And what they pulled out of that building, dozens of sealed suitcases and boxes packed inside a truck, has been laboratory confirmed as high-purity cocaine with an estimated street value of $370 million. That is the largest drug seizure in Liberia's recorded history, and the passport evidence alone tells you something about the transnational fingerprint. Investigators recovered documents from Spain, Colombia, and Serbia at the scene. But here is the thing I keep coming back to. No formal charges have been announced yet. Origin and destination are still unknown by authorities' own admission. And the country just had a 19-point. Now we move the map to Arizona, and what I want to focus on isn't just the weight, it's the operational span. Operation Mechanic ran from April 2025 all the way through January 2026, a 9-month multi-agency corridor investigation that the DEA Phoenix Field Division, the Arizona AG's office, Maricopa County Sheriff, HSI, and HIDTA all had hands in. And when they finally announced in March, the table read over 1,750 pounds of methamphetamine, more than 113 pounds of cocaine, over 11 pounds of fentanyl in both pill and powder form, nearly 24 firearms, more than 24 vehicles, over $612,000 in cash, and $300,000 in cryptocurrency. 35 arrests, and the DEA's own SAC flagged something that doesn't show up in the headline numbers. And here is where I want to close out this physical evidence block. Because the OPP Provincial Asset Forfeiture Unit being engaged on Project Bay is not a footnote. It is the signal that investigators believe there is a proceeds of crime layer here worth formally pursuing. What that engagement means in practice is a separate investigative strand, tracing property, accounts, and assets that can be argued in court to have flowed from the trafficking operation. Not just the drugs on the table, but the financial infrastructure that moved the money. Now, I will be straight with you. As of this morning, no specific assets have been publicly identified under that forfeiture probe, and the investigation into the source and scope of the network remains ongoing by police's own admission. That unit being in the room tells me investigators believe the money trail exists. But whether it leads somewhere prosecutable is a question. Now we're in Block B, the network map. And I want to start with the architecture that Project Bay actually exposed. Because this is exactly the tier of infrastructure that most bust announcements gloss over. What investigators documented here wasn't a loose crew. Police allege a broker-style operation embedded inside the commercial transportation industry, where established connections were used to arrange for drivers to knowingly move product across the Windsor U.S. border corridor inside legitimate supply chains. That is a logistics cutout, a human layer insulating the supply side from any single intercept. And here's the thing that tells me Toronto PD's early 2026 probe wasn't coincidental. CBC is reporting that Toronto police, investigating criminal networks in the GTA, quickly realized they were investigating the same suspects as the project. Let me give you the network layer on Liberia's Douazon bust, because this is where it gets genuinely troubling. Police confirmed the two foreign suspects in custody are Johan David Garces Grajales, who was traveling on both Colombian and Spanish passports, and Srdan Celis, a Serbian national. And a tip from a cartel member already in custody is what led investigators to the stash house in Paynesville. But here is the detail I cannot let pass without flagging it hard. As of yesterday, Liberia's Police Inspector General has relieved the Deputy Commissioner for Crime Services, Johnny Bollardine, from his post after he allegedly admitted to receiving $10,000 in connection with the very suspects being held. And that is not a footnote. That is a compromised evidence chain at the senior law enforcement level, which is precisely the kind of institutional penetration that tells you this network. So here's where Operation Mechanic needs to be stress tested on the network layer, because the physical seizure numbers are substantial, but the conspiracy architecture is where this operation either holds up or doesn't. What the Arizona AG's office confirmed is that indictment documents were provided showing dozens of people facing drug, conspiracy, weapons, and money laundering charges, but NCSO declined to release the names of those arrested, citing the ongoing investigation. That is a deliberate decision, and I respect operational security. But it means we cannot independently verify what tier of the network those 35 arrests actually reached. The DEA's own SAC told reporters the intelligence uncovered the methods used to launder illicit profits. That is the financial intelligence layer running in parallel to the physical seizure. But no named cartel affiliation, no identified leadership node. Block C, follow the dirty money. And I want to lay the financial evidence picture across all three operations side by side, because they tell very different stories about where the money trail actually leads. On Project Bay, the OPP Provincial Asset Forfeiture Unit is engaged, and per the official release, their mandate is to examine proceeds of crime offenses and assist in the seizure of offense-related property. But I have to be precise here. As Net News Ledger correctly flagged, involvement of a forfeiture unit does not mean seized cash or property has been proven connected to an offense. Those matters must be established through the court process, full stop. On Operation Mechanic, the Arizona AG's office confirmed over $612,000 in cash and $300,000 in cryptocurrency were confiscated alongside nearly 24 vehicles. So let me put a forfeiture scorecard on the table, because this is where the three operations diverge sharply, and the numbers do not lie. On Project Bay, the OPP's own asset forfeiture unit is engaged, but I want to be precise the way Net News Ledger was precise. The involvement of a forfeiture unit does not establish that any cash or property is proven connected to an offense. Those matters must be established through the court process, and the investigation is still active. Operation Mechanic is the clearest financial evidence layer of the three. Over $612,000 in cash and $300,000 in cryptocurrency confirmed seized. Indictments that include money laundering charges on record. And the DEA's SAC on record saying investigators uncovered the methods used to launder illicit profits. That is a prosecutable paper trail, even if the specific mechanisms haven't been detailed publicly. And then, all right, This is the Backdoor audit, and I'm going to be straight with you and with this audience. Across all three operations, the supply tier is not closed, and the evidence record is clear on that. Project Bay, FreightWaves confirmed it remains an active investigation. Net News Ledger reported the source of the drugs and the full scope of the trafficking network remain under investigation, and 2 suspects are still at large. That broker layer inside commercial trucking, still intact until those open threads are resolved. Operation Mechanic, MCSO declined to release names. No cartel leadership was publicly identified, and the DEA's own SAC framed it as targeting criminal organizations, plural. The corridor is disrupted, not dismantled. And Duazon is the most troubling of the three. GNN Liberia reported that investigators are still working to trace the origin. Let's put the charges picture on the table, because this is where the 3 operations diverge sharply on legal substance. Project Bay is the strongest on paper. 21 individuals charged with 102 offenses. And the charge sheet runs from conspiracy to import cocaine all the way to unauthorized possession of restricted firearms. And critically, CBC reported that the arrests span low-level truckers used as couriers all the way up to top-tier brokers coordinating the international operation, which is exactly the tiering you want to see in a conspiracy case. But Windsor Police Chief Jason Crowley said the quiet part out loud at the press conference. He acknowledged these arrests are not dismantling entire networks, and that this investigation may lead to other cases. That is a police chief telling you, on record, that the back door is still open. Operation Mechanic's charge picture is still sealed behind MCSO's name embargo. Now, let's pull the cooperator thread, because this is where the 3 cases either gain legs or stall out entirely, and the picture is uneven at best. Project Bay is the strongest. 21 charged, 102 offenses on the sheet. And Windsor Police Chief Jason Crowley said on record that this investigation may be at conclusion now, but it does lead to other criminal organizations. That is a tacit acknowledgement that cooperating testimony is the path forward, even if no formal cooperator status has been publicly announced. Operation Mechanic's name embargo is still holding. The Arizona AG's office confirmed prosecution is proceeding, but with no publicly identified defendants, there's no public thread to pull on for cooperation deals. And the DEA's 9-month intelligence haul is the real asset, not the arrests. And Duazon is the most structurally fragile. GNN Liberia reported that